My worst experience on tour was stumbling upon a horrifying and sickening page called Human Experiments. I found it buried deep in a link archive page, and the homepage alone was disturbing. Written in a red, bloody font, it described experiments conducted to prove that not all humans are born equal. The victims were often homeless individuals or unfortunate souls who happened to be caught by these deranged people. The experiments ranged from starvation and water restriction to reactions to extreme pain and torture, infections, diseases, and even testing infant tolerances to X-rays, pain, and heat. Having seen my share of shocking videos like 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. Against my better judgment, I clicked on the first link to the experiment photos, and what I saw made me feel physically ill. I won't describe it, but the images depicted innocent people enduring unspeakable horrors. Despite my nausea, I scrolled through the entire page, and it only got worse. Eventually, I stumbled upon a section dedicated to infants and toddlers, which was unbearable. When I reached the bottom of the page, a chat box popped up on my screen asking, "Did you enjoy the site?" Realizing it was interactive, I asked, "Who is this?" The stranger evaded my question, asking instead what my favorite part of the site was. I repeated my question, and this time, he admitted he was the site owner. Disgusted, I told him this was inhumane and that I would report the site immediately. That turned out to be my biggest mistake. After a short pause, he replied, I see your name is Michael and you live in Massachusetts." He was correct. Panicking, I denied it, typing, "No, you're wrong." 10 seconds later, he responded with my full, correct home address. His final words chilled me to the bone. "Have a nice day." I slammed my laptop shut and called the police before even telling my parents. When the officers arrived, I explained everything. Unfortunately, since I had used the Tor browser, I couldn't provide the link to the site, as the browser doesn't save browsing history. The police advised us to find a new place to stay immediately. Thankfully, we were already in the process of moving, and my parents acted quickly to sell the house and relocate. I apologized to them every day for a month, feeling immense guilt for putting them through this ordeal. To this day, I like to think the person behind the chat was bluffing, but I couldn't risk taking that chance. My advice to anyone is to stay far away from the deep web. Nothing good ever comes of it. T.I. made the mistake of searching the deep web one time I saw on Reddit. Some people are talking about this thing called Tor that allows you to search the deep web, and it was basically post asking for the strangest things people have come across on the deep web. It intrigued me some of the things people have found, so I went along and downloaded Tor. Someone on Reddit posted a link to a basically hidden wiki with a bunch of useful links to the dark web. I was shocked at how many pornographically links there were. I did my best to steer clear of anything like that. I did come across a link that took me to another page with a bunch of links called the Black Pages. The page was black with a bunch of red and yellow links. The read pages seemed to be the strangest. There was one link called Personal Assassin and another called Dead Pets. Reading some of those links, I realized how messed up this whole deep web thing really was. I clicked a yellow link and ended up at yet another page full of links. There, I found something that seemed interesting. It was called the Secret Society chat. I clicked on the link and it took even longer than all the other pages took to load. I'd say I stared at a blank white screen for a good minute before the page finally turned black, and the chat box popped up. Next to the chat box was a black video screen. I wish that I just clicked the back button at that point, but instead I typed "Hey" in the chat box. What happened next was weird. Someone wearing a mask sitting in a dark room popped up on. I felt like my heart stopped when I saw my face pop up on the screen as well. The website was using my webcam. Even though I naturally keep it off, I covered it with my thumb and tried to close the page, but at this point my taskbar was gone. Along with the minimize and exit buttons at the top of the auto win tried hitting Control. Alt-Delete but did nothing. And then there was a muffled, distorted voice coming from my speakers. I could only assume it was the guy in the mask speaking. He was masking his voice with some kind of voice changer. I clearly remember he said, "I still see James." My heart sank. He had said my name. I began holding the power button on my laptop, and it felt like an eternity before it finally cut power. I didn't know if I should report what happened to the police, but from what I knew, everything was anonymous with Poor, so it didn't even seem worth it. It was obviously just a low-life hacker. I went on with my life after deleting the Tor browser from my computer. But about 2 weeks later, my mom threw a letter in my room. She told me it came in the mail form. There was no return address on it. I ripped the letter open and unfolded the paper tucked inside in huge letters that filled the paper, where the 3 words "don't come back." I felt like I was going to throw up from the sickening feeling it gave me. I crumpled up the paper and threw it away. I didn't call the cops as the team's pointless. And I didn't tell my mom because it would only cause her to panic, but I have no idea how or why they got my address. I should have thought better of it, but love makes you act irrationally sometimes. It clouds your judgment and makes you ignore the possible consequences of your actions. I never believed in supernatural nonsense, but what happened changed everything. Trisha's gaze was empty after the loss of our baby. Along with our daughter, the joy she had brought to our lives was gone. Months passed, and Trisha hadn't even left her room. Her hands often touched her belly, and her sad, lost eyes searched for something she couldn't find. Watching her crumble every time reality hit was a kind of torture that tore me apart. I had tried everything: therapy, medication, time together, but nothing could bring her back. It was unbearable to watch the woman I loved wither from the pain of losing a child we had both longed for. So, when my friend Greg suggested an odd and uncomfortable solution, I didn't think twice. "Hey, Jack," he said hesitantly, "there's something called a humanized doll. It's not just any doll. It's designed to resemble the child they should have had. It's often used in these situations to comfort grieving mothers, giving them something to nurture and love." The idea was insane, but at least it was something. Greg explained he knew of a site on the dark web where such dolls could be ordered. I found it strange he mentioned the dark web, a place I knew was rife with illegal activity, but he assured me it wasn't just any doll. He wouldn't elaborate further, and I didn't press him. At that point, I was desperate to get Trisha out of her darkness. I followed his instructions and placed the order. The package arrived in a plain white box with no markings, as though it wasn't supposed to exist. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a doll so lifelike it took my breath away. She had Trisha's dark eyes, my facial features, and a near-realistic smile. That's when I realized why they had asked for a photograph of us. When Trisha saw the doll, her demeanor shifted instantly. She embraced it as though it were flesh and blood, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. My heart leaped with hope, thinking maybe this would help her heal. But that was the last peaceful moment we had. That night, I woke to find her in the rocking chair, cradling the doll against her chest and softly singing. At first, I thought this was progress, but over the following days things took a sinister turn. Trisha stopped eating, sleeping, and talking to me. Her entire existence revolved around the doll, which she had named Blue. Though the name struck me as odd, I avoided questioning it. It wasn't until she approached me with a knife one night that I realized how far gone she was. "Trisha, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. She lunged at me, her face twisted in a grotesque grimace, as if possessed. I barely dodged the attack, and as I stumbled back in terror, my eyes locked on the doll. Its vacant gaze glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth curled into a haunting smile. It felt as though it were alive. The atmosphere in the house grew oppressive. Trisha's obsession deepened. She fed the doll, changed its diapers, and cradled it as if it were a real baby. One night, the fire alarm went off, and I found her sobbing in the kitchen, blaming herself for being a horrible mother. She clutched the doll to her chest, and to my horror, I heard it cry. It seemed impossible, but the sound was unmistakable. Frightened and desperate, I examined the doll. Beneath its skin, I found a tangle of wires and a small black device, a camera. Someone had been spying on us, turning our grief into their twisted entertainment. Outraged and terrified, I gathered the evidence and contacted the police. The cybercrime unit tried to trace the website but hit a dead end. The perpetrators had covered their tracks too well. The fallout was devastating. Trisha's mental state deteriorated further, requiring extensive therapy to cope with the compounded trauma. I learned the hard way that grief is love with no place to go. But we can't let it control our lives. We must find a way to move forward. Months later, we received miraculous news. Trisha was pregnant again. Today, our daughter Emma is nearing her first birthday. She's a beautiful, healthy little girl, and Trisha is the loving, vibrant mother I once knew. Life has given us another chance, and I'm endlessly grateful. Yet, the dark web and the horrors it brought into our lives remains a haunting memory. It serves as a grim reminder that some places, no matter how tempting in desperate times, are best left unexplored. I first heard about the Silk Road, an underground marketplace on the dark web, through friends. They swore it was legit. Our regular weed dealer had just moved out of state, leaving us without a source. With my parents away in Atlantic City for the weekend, the timing felt perfect to give it a try. After downloading the Tor browser, I explored the site. Cannabis was the most popular listing. I left a comment on one of the newer postings, asking if anyone could vouch for its legitimacy. An hour later, I returned to find a private message from a user named ILEB. He saw my comment and offered to sell me an ounce at a ridiculously low price, but only through a local meetup. I'd done local deals before without any issues, so I messaged him back, telling him I lived in Washington. Conveniently, he claimed to live only an hour away. I suggested meeting halfway, but he offered to come to my hometown instead. That was hard to pass up. We agreed to meet in the Wendy's parking lot around 9 p.m. But then things started to get weird. He asked a series of personal questions: where I lived, who I lived with, and more. I lied, saying I lived alone. Shortly after, he texted me again, suggesting a new location behind an old, closed-down retail store on the outskirts of town. My gut told me something was off, but I ignored it. Desperation clouded my judgment. I drove to the spot and parked behind the building. It was deserted. Moments later, I got a text saying he was on his way, but something didn't add up. How would he know this location if he wasn't from the area? After waiting 20 minutes without another response, I decided to leave. Something about the situation screamed danger. When I got home, my front door was ajar. My heart sank. I distinctly remembered locking it. Worried my parents might have returned early, I parked in the driveway and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, except for a faint shuffling noise coming from upstairs. The light in my parents' bedroom was on. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" The noise stopped, and the bedroom door slammed shut. Panic set in. My dad's car wasn't in the driveway, and neither of my parents was answering. Realizing the intruder wasn't them, I grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen and headed upstairs. I kicked open the bedroom door. No one was visible at first, but the open jewelry case on my mom's dresser told me enough. I picked up the corded phone on the nightstand and dialed 911. Midway through explaining the situation to the dispatcher, I felt something grab my ankle from under the bed. Acting on instinct, I stabbed down with the knife, hitting flesh. A man screamed in pain and rolled out from beneath the bed, clutching his arm where the knife stuck out. Without looking back, he bolted down the stairs and out the front door. I got a glimpse of him. A black man in ragged clothes wearing a backward cap. He jumped into a black Honda Accord and sped off into the night. The police arrived shortly after. I told them everything, but I couldn't mention the Silk Road without incriminating myself. I could only describe the man and his car. He's still out there somewhere, free. The worst part? I'm sure he got my address by hacking me.